Welcome to the Tom Sense Show. We have got a massive hour ahead of us. From Donald Trump holding the line against unfair foreign trade and foreign pressure to an incredible display of American horsepower right in the heart of Washington, D.C. Before we dive into the headlines, remember that you can drop your questions into the YouTube chat at any point during this broadcast. You do not have to wait for a special segment or the end of the hour. If you post a sharp, serious question that actually matters, I will pull it up and answer it right here on the air. Let us get straight to the news. Trade talks between the United States and Canada completely fell apart late Friday night ahead of a midnight tariff deadline. That triggered 50% American tariffs on between $20 billion and $28 billion worth of Canadian goods. United States Trade Representative Jamieson Greer made the position very clear, pointing out that these measures are necessary countermeasures after an entire year of Canadian trade barriers. Now, Canadian Prime Minister Mark Carney came out on Saturday claiming his country was attacked, and he promised dollar-for-dollar retaliatory tariffs starting on the 8th of September in 2026. Carney whined that the Trump administration made last-minute demands regarding auto manufacturing, language protections, and Canadian sovereignty. Notice how foreign leaders always talk about their own sovereignty, the exact second an American president decides to protect ours. For decades, our northern neighbors got used to running protectionist schemes against American dairy, manufacturing, and business while treating our open markets as a birthright. Jamieson Greer and Donald Trump are finally delivering the plain message that if you lock out American goods, your free ride at the border is officially over. Prime Minister Carney can stand at a podium and call a basic trade tariff an attack all he wants, but running a 50% levy on our exports for years while screaming victim the moment the bill comes due is not diplomacy. It turns out that when you spend years hiding behind trade walls, you do not get to be shocked when the front door finally swings back in your face. A federal district judge in New York has decided that she knows more about national security and borders than the executive branch. United States District Judge Jeanette Vargas struck down a Trump administration policy that suspended immigrant visa processing from 75 countries. The administration put that ban in place back in January of 2026, pointing out that applicants from high-risk nations like Brazil, Egypt, and Nigeria posed a serious risk of becoming a public charge on the American taxpayer. Judge Vargas ruled that Secretary of State Marco Rubio exceeded his authority, claiming consular officers were unlawfully directed to issue blanket rejections based on nationality. That ruling throws out every single visa denial made under the policy and opens the floodgates back up, though the Department of Justice is already preparing an appeal. Immigration activists are celebrating, but let us look at the plain reality. The administration looked at countries where people are statistically most likely to end up relying on state assistance, and Secretary of State Marco Rubio said our priority should be protecting American resources and American workers. Every single nation on planet Earth has the basic right to decide who walks through its front door based on whether those newcomers can pull their own weight. If a federal judge in New York believes foreign nationals have a constitutional right to an American welfare check before they even land on our soil, maybe she should volunteer her own courtroom budget to pay for it. President Donald Trump made it entirely clear this weekend that Washington will not be rushed into a bad agreement with the regime in Tehran. Speaking to reporters on Saturday before taking off for a rally in South Carolina, Trump announced that Iran is simply not ready to make the right deal. Instead of rushing into meaningless talks, the president made clear that stepped-up economic sanctions and tight maritime restrictions are doing their job by squeezing the Iranian economy. The administration has recently expanded countermeasures targeting regional trade corridors and third-party commercial partners who try to do business with Tehran. Iranian foreign ministry officials rushed to dismiss the move as domestic political theater, claiming they will never negotiate under economic pressure. But here is the plain fact every viewer can see. For years, the foreign policy establishment told us that the only way to deal with rogue regimes was to send them cargo planes full of cash and beg for a signature on a piece of paper they would violate by Tuesday. Donald Trump is applying maximum economic leverage because strength is the only language Tehran actually respects. If the regime in Iran really believes these sanctions are just empty political talk with zero teeth, they would not be spending every single press conference complaining about how badly their economy is hurting. You do not sit down at a negotiating table until the other side realizes they have run out of cards to play. Turning overseas to Ukraine, where a horrific Russian drone strike devastated a crowded shopping center in the central city of Kryvyi. At least 15 civilians were killed and dozens more were wounded in the blast. Ukrainian emergency services reported that a second drone struck the exact same building about 30 minutes after the initial explosion. That calculated double-tap tactic was clearly intended to hit firefighters, medical workers, and first responders rushing to pull survivors out of the rubble. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky condemned the attack on his hometown, calling it cynical and despicable, while repeating his urgent demands for international action and air defense reinforcements. Western allies have strongly condemned this direct targeting of civilian infrastructure, as local rescue crews concluded their grim recovery operations amid the wreckage. This strike marks one of the deadliest civilian bombardments in Ukraine this month. Striking a shopping mall packed with everyday people buying groceries is an atrocity, but deliberately waiting 30 minutes to drop a second warhead on the paramedics and rescue workers trying to save lives is pure evil. It shows a complete disregard for human life and proves once again the brutal reality of this ongoing conflict. Out in California, Governor Gavin Newsom spent his Saturday signing even more red tape into state law. Newsom enacted Assembly Bill 1651, authored by Assemblymember Diane Dixon, which creates state-level regulations for how artificial intelligence can be used in the legal profession. The law forces the State Bar of California to enforce strict new guidelines on generative machine learning tools used by lawyers. Attorneys will now be legally required to disclose whenever they use artificial intelligence in substantive court filings, and the state is setting up liability rules regarding digital hallucinations and client privacy. Legal reform advocates are praising the measure as a critical consumer protection, while plenty of legal practitioners are wondering how much extra compliance costs are going to hit their clients. The tech policy crowd is already predicting this will become a national template for other state bar associations across the country. Only in Sacramento could politicians take a technological breakthrough that exists to make work faster and cheaper and immediately turn it into a massive compliance headache with mandatory disclosure forms and endless liability hoops. If California lawmakers put half as much effort into making the state affordable for working families as they do inventing brand new regulations for software, businesses would not be fleeing the state in droves. Gavin Newsom never misses a chance to invent a whole new bureaucracy to solve a problem that private enterprise was already handling on its own. The streets of our nation's capital were roaring on Saturday for an incredible American celebration. Washington, D.C. hosted the inaugural Freedom 250 Grand Prix right across the National Mall, marking a flagship public event for the 250th anniversary of the Declaration of Independence. The exhibition brought high-powered motorsport racing right past historic monuments, featuring the International Race of Champions that was ultimately won by NASCAR legend Jeff Gordon. Massive crowds showed up to watch American muscle tear through the city streets. Naturally, local critics and urban preservationists were complaining all weekend about street closures, traffic gridlock, and whether race cars belonged near national monuments. District officials defended the event, pointing out the massive economic boost it brought to the capital for this historic summer celebration. The entire showcase went off smoothly without a single operational disruption. For years, Washington, D.C. has been famous for bureaucratic stagnation and gridlock where nothing ever seems to move. Seeing historic American race cars flying down the National Mall to celebrate 250 years of American independence was a phenomenal reminder of American speed, innovation, and pride. If a few local bureaucrats got stuck in traffic because real American horsepower took over their streets for an afternoon, that sounds like the best celebration our capital has seen in years. That wraps up this hour of the Tom Sense Show. Stay strong, keep your common sense sharp, and I will see you right back here next time.